This is Durwood Shepard, the Standard Plans Publication Engineer with the Roadway Design Office here in Central Office. Welcome this morning, and we'll go ahead and get started. The agenda for the training today, just a little quick overview of the Standard Plans website, the Errata process, revision history log. I have a quick presentation or a quick slide on the FDOT design manual. And then from there, we'll start going into some of the individual standard plans updates. I'll be joined by Richard Stepp, Ed Cashman, and Cheryl Hudson from the Structures Design Office. So for the website, there's not a lot of major changes this cycle. After we did our transition from design standards to standard plans, we redeveloped the site to kind of make it a little bit more of a central area to access both the standard plans and previous versions of design standards, along with some of the support documentation. One thing I do want to point out is under the support information, the CAD files, if you click on this link, it will always take you to the current version of the standard plans and those associated DGNs. You can see once navigating to the actual standard plan site, this is where we're going to start populating year after year new versions of the standard plans, and as you can see, the 2019-2020 version is now active. So if you wanted to access older versions of CAD files or cells, you would have to go into the individual year, and that was one thing I wanted to point out. Once you navigate into the standard plans year version that you're looking for, it's just generally the same look and feel that it's had for a number of years, even under the design standards. Individual indexes are accessible through this link, as well as the entire ebook for the standard plans for road construction. We started an Errata process a couple of years ago. I always like to point that out during this training, just to let people know that when we make fairly insignificant or typographical errors that we don't want to have to wait an entire cycle to correct, we'll go ahead and make those edits and post them. And if that type of change has occurred, those erratas will appear on the website in this column. The revision log. This is another topic that I always like to bring up, just because the vast majority of some of the changes that occur from one cycle to the next, if you have questions about where something went or what type of change occurred within a certain index, the revision log is always the best place to start. It's the best place to start if you're having to do a plans update for a project to go from one version of the standards to the next. This is the best place to start for that, so you know what sort of items within the index has changed, and you can account for those within your plans update. The FDOT design manual, we post the majority of the department's major publications, especially relating to design, at the same time every year, November 1st. And along with that is the FDOT design manual, which commonly has a lot of similar changes or changes that occur within our standard plans also result in a change to the FDM. They will be providing training coming up very soon. Announcement will be sent out via contact mailer. And once those webinars are available for the various FDM chapters, they will appear on the website in this area shown on the screen. One thing that we added to the FDM last year with the first release was a new chapter 115 as it relates to the standard plans and standard specifications. If you want more information about interim revisions or errata or any of the general processes, including developmentals, that is the chapter within the FDM to go to find additional information about the different processes that are used within the standard plans. So from here, I'm just going to go through what I kind of tagged as some of the miscellaneous indexes that we made changes to this cycle, and we'll just step by step go through some of these small changes. Starting with the miscellaneous earthwork details, this was included in the 000 section of the standard plans, which is the kind of group that doesn't necessarily tie with any specific specifications, or when we made our initial shift from design standards to standard plans, we didn't have a clear path for where some of these indexes might fall, so they got numbered starting with 000. The miscellaneous earthwork details, we took another look at this cycle and decided to start breaking it up and assign it a little bit better index number. So within this index, the majority of the details had to do with stabilization within the medians. And so the primary content here got re-indexed to 160-001. And then there was one detail on this index dealing with excess base material removal, and it was previously referenced within index 120-001, and since it kind of deals with embankment use around the roadbed, it made a good fit to relocate that information within that index. So here's just a quick look at index 160. Again, the majority of those details had to do with stabilization, so it made a good fit to re-index it to match with specification 160. Embankment utilization, standard plan index 120-001 is where we relocated the excess base material information. And then we also did some general layout adjustments within this index to kind of make it match up with the current formatting that we're using for the roadway standard plans, as well as bringing it up to date with new CAD standards. So we aside from just bringing in the excess base material, we updated the index and the general notes. One other change to index 120-001 was the removal of the treated permeable base option, which was previously sheet 2. The department has moved in a direction of no longer having treated permeable base as an option for rigid pavement, and as referenced in the rigid pavement design manual, currently only asphalt base or special select soils is shown. So real quickly, we'll go on to some of the super elevation indexes. These indexes will still be in the 000 range because super elevation can obviously apply to several different pavement types that are covered by several different specifications. But one change we did want to make this year is removal of some of the redundant information that is included within the FDM. And in some cases, there was a little bit of conflicting information, especially as we shifted towards some of the new complete streets policy related to super elevation rates. And so the information in here, which was specifically design information related to determining super elevation rates, was deleted, and it's already and was previously included in FDM 210.9. One other change to the high-speed super elevations index was the addition of a concrete pavement note. This information was covered in the FDM previously. However, as it relates to concrete pavement and the break point along the shoulder line is different than when we use flexible pavement, and we wanted to make sure that that information was clearly communicated to the contractor in the event that some of these details of the shoulder break point aren't real clear in the plan. So for the low-speed roadway super elevation, it's the same exact situation with removal of FDM information relating to the super elevation rates. Now, one of the major changes that involve some significant changes between the FDM and the standard plans that I'm going to cover this morning has to do with the turnouts and driveways indexes, both what was previously index 515 and 516 under the design standards. So the main issue with these indexes had to deal with one of the changes that we've been making through a lot of standard plans recently, which is trying to remove criteria information and the standard plans be purely a construction document. And so as it relates to the turnouts and driveways index, there was a vast majority of this index included design criteria for the driveways, including, for example, geometric requirements, the connection widths, flare distances, radius and setback requirements. And so that information, along with some of the definitions that were included within the index, such as connection category types, application types. Previously we covered what the definitions of the different profile types were under the alphanumeric codes, and a lot of that information will now be explained in the FDM. There was also a lot of information included within the index that was describing some of the differences between maintenance's responsibility with driveways and the permittee of a driveway or the owner of a driveway. And a lot of this information is already included in the Florida Administrative Code Rule 1496 for state highway connection permits. And that's another place where there was some redundancy within the standard and the rule document, and those didn't necessarily match up in all cases. And so that was removed so it would allow the rule document to stand on its own. So again, the majority of the criteria information has been moved to a new chapter within the FDM, Chapter 214. And as also mentioned before, there will be a new webinar series posted for the FDM changes, and a new webinar for Chapter 214 will be posted very soon. And then as a result of moving a lot of this information around, we ended up creating two new indexes that cover the primary issues that were covered under 515 and 516 previously. And so that's been broken up between concrete driveways, which is paid for and covered under specification 522, and then the other part of it would be paved or graded driveways, which we realign with specification 330, which is kind of a miscellaneous pavement index. And there's not necessarily any payment associated with that, because again, this could be a paved or graded driveway, or it could be a concrete driveway that's just on a flush shoulder or has radial return. So we kind of generically just placed it in 330 for better alignment. So just as an example, looking at old index turnouts and driveways, standard plan index 000515, you can see here the vast majority of the information on sheet 1 was all criteria information moved to the new chapter 214. An example here of sheet 6 was where we had a lot of information about maintenance responsibilities and what part of the driveway maintenance was responsible for and which areas they weren't. And again, that's covered in Rule 1496. And then one of the final sheets within the old index that had primarily criteria information was sheet 7, which had all the turnout profile information. So just real quickly look at some of the sheets of the new concrete flare driveways. And again, we pulled all the information that was previously related to purely concrete turnouts and put that within 522, which is the specification with which these would be paid for and the workmanship would be done under for construction. So this sheet is primarily includes content from what was sheet 2 of old design standard index 515. We reformatted it to resemble a lot what you would see in index 522002 for curb ramps. And we included a nomenclature drawing similar to the curb ramps index to kind of define the terms used with either within this index or within the specification. Sheet 2 covers the different layout configurations that you would see depending on the offset of the sidewalk from the curb line. One thing that wasn't really addressed that well previously for concrete driveways was the flare of the sidewalk around the driveway. And so we included two different options now, option A and option B, where you could either match the flare of the driveway itself, which is option A, or option B, where you just apply a 45-degree angle with a 4-foot minimum sidewalk. We didn't include any specific requirements for when to use one versus the other. It was just to provide some flexibility and actually place some specific requirements for what those flares are to look like. And then the other plan views included on this sheet are, again, just covering the options that were previously covered in Index 515. This one for utility strips equal to or greater than 10 feet wide, and then finally the one for utility strips less than 10 feet wide. The rest of the index just includes the alphanumeric identified typical driveway profiles that were previously included in Index 515. So continuing on, as I said, the majority of the information from the Turnouts and Driveways indexes was moved to the FDM, and the new indexes were created. The second of those indexes was a new Paved and Graded Driveways Index, 330-001. The majority of this information was from sheets 5 of 515 and from Index 516. The majority of this information is just as it was presented in the previous index, with some modifications to the notes to remove some of the construction phase decision making and make it work a little bit more cleanly. Sheet 2, you'll see that it looks a lot like the previous Design Standard Index 516 with a couple of modifications to really bring some of the new construction and resurfacing project information together into one document. And we updated the cross sections along the right side of the index, as you can see here. Some of the call outs for base material and the surface and friction courses was a little outdated, so we updated those. One of the primary changes was the addition of what you see here is detail A, which is the friction course transition. Previously, as you can see here, we just called it out as a 1-foot feathering of the friction course. However, that wasn't always all that practical, and you'd end up with raveling of the friction course if you tried to take it down all the way to basically 0. So we worked with the pavement section here at RDO, and we changed that transition to just provide a 1/4 inch drop off at the end of the transition. So real quickly, just a few more indexes that I'll cover, one of them being the concrete pavement joint index 350-001. The primary change here was just simply deleting the key joint option within the index, which we were finding out wasn't being used all that often. Index 522-001 for concrete sidewalks, we made some minor adjustments here for clarification of primarily when to apply expansion joints. And the primary question was beginning to become when to, or if expansion joints were required when the sidewalk met up with the back of curb inlets. So within the examples shown on the index, we updated them and the note A about expansion joints to make it more clear that it is required for inlets. So a quick look here at the new index. You can see that we switched out some of the driveway options in the examples to actually show curb inlets and call out the type A expansion joint. We also did a little bit of cleanup of specification 522 because there was a lot of redundant information dealing with the joints. And so 522 was a lot of information will be deleted out of that specification since the joints are handled here on the index. And like I said, we revised the note for the joint type A so that it was more clear that it would be required between all types of fixed objects. And that language is a little bit confusing with the way the specification was written previously. Index 522-002 for detectable warnings. Made a few minor adjustments to this index again. On sheet 1, we updated note C. The old language on the index referred to not allowing warps or varying slopes within the ramp and to keep it all on a single linear plane. However, that's not always practical, especially if you're trying to chase a grade along the mainline roadway. So more practical approach is the new language that we applied to note C, which is just telling the contractor to maintain a single longitudinal slope along each side of the curb ramp, and that allows the ramp to match up with variations in roadway grade. On sheet 2, we made some modifications to CRA and CRV alphanumerics for the curb ramp types. These changes were primarily done just to allow the index to work with the the sidewalk width requirements that are now included in FDM Chapter 222, along with the changes for complete streets, which provided for wider sidewalks in some of the contact zones. And this index still had a lot of reference to 5-foot minimum sidewalks, or had sidewalk widths that really didn't match up with what our criteria shows as the sidewalk width should be. So in some cases, we realize that these curb ramps will still match up with sidewalk widths of maybe 5 feet on existing projects, or new sidewalks of 10 foot. So what we really try to do is just, these plan views are intended to be an example showing what the width could be, but more so establishing what the minimum requirements are for cross slopes and widths within the ramp itself. And so there's always going to be some variation to these plan views in the actual plan set anyway. But so we just updated these to not be so strict on stating that certain sidewalk widths were minimums that might conflict with the FDM. On sheet 4, we added an option to the CRE type of curb ramp, and this was really just to kind of draw attention to the fact that in a lot of cases where the sidewalk might have some significant setback from the back of curb, that the best curb ramp option is more likely to be the CRE type, where we've kind of seen a trend where we were seeing more of the CRA type of curb ramp in an application where it really didn't fit. And so we just wanted to draw attention to that, so we created a separate option showing it with not just a perpendicular sidewalk, but actually with a parallel sidewalk to the curb, just at a larger offset. On sheet 6, we made some adjustments to the pavement relief detail. This primarily had to do with some of the allowable ADA slope differentials, and the fact that in some cases you might actually have to remove part of the gutter lip to maintain a maximum 5% slope and not introduce a break point greater than allowed under ADA. And so we just updated this detail for pavement relief to actually show the new surface of the curb ramp on the roadside to be lining up with the gutter line of the curb instead of matching the top of the initial pavement surface. One final change on this index was adding some curb transition details that were previously included in the Turnouts and Driveways index. But basically it was just showing some minimum details for how to terminate or transition a curb beyond a curb ramp, and so we just relocated that information on sheet 8. Final comment here will be about some miscellaneous traffic control signals and devices indexes. I don't have a lot of detail here, but these indexes, including the conduit installation details, aerial interconnect, pool and spice boxes, span wire mounting sign details, vehicle loop installation details, and cabinet installation details, all of these indexes received kind of a general update to them. No design changes or content changes. We just updated these indexes. The rest of the 600 series had already received updates to the CAD details to match current CAD standards, or updating the layout to match current layout design policy. And we did some note consolidation, but for the most part, these indexes, it was just kind of what I would refer to as a refresh, not much a change in terms of content, but I just wanted to make sure y'all are aware. And from here, I think Ed's been handling a few of the questions that have been coming in on the questions pane. Looking at the time, I think I'll go ahead and hand it off to Richard Stepp. All right, thanks, Cheryl. One thing that I did want to pull up real quick for everyone, based on some questions we were seeing, was where some of this information that was talked about, whether it be the standard plans, instructions, or the some of the cell library stuff or some of the programs. and I believe you should all be able to see my screen with the web browser on it. Yes. Okay, so on the Standard Plans website, like I said earlier, you can access the latest CAD files and cell libraries on the support web page, and what that'll do is just bring up the website that contains all the DGNs and cells, as long as there is one associated with that standard plan index. And so we were trying to split a little bit of information out of the primary Standard Plans year web page, so there wasn't quite as much information there. So that's why this information is now located on a separate sheet, but it's by year. And so if you need some historical version of it, it is still available. In terms of the Standard Plans instructions and any associated design tools, for example, here with temporary barrier, you'll see that the instructions, or SPIs, are located in this column and can be accessed there. And then if there's an associated design program, like Richard mentioned for length of need determination, the Excel program is listed as well. And then there are a number of the indexes that the structures office oversees that have programs as well that might be MathCAD related, and that'll take you to a separate structures site that has those different programs available. And with that, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up for today. We were able to answer the majority of the questions added into the chat as we were going, and like Bobby said initially, we will post that Q&A for everyone to see upon posting the webinar in video format, and we'll also provide a copy of the PowerPoint presentation in PDF. Thank you, and have a good day.